Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, I'm a couple days away from getting back home. As you can see, I'm still in my mobile setup, but I have the weekend off. And I finally geared up my my character for my Soulwrest build, Guardian, that I wanted to, that I'm comfortable doing a build guide on. So anyway, what are we talking about? What are we doing here? Alright, so if you remember last league, I did a Soulwrest build for the Witch, and I'll put that link in the description. Now, nothing has changed in that build guide. Essentially, nothing really changes with this build league on league because it's so damn consistent. So, okay, let's go with something a little bit different, and let's go with a Guardian. So, just pop my auras on here. So, what is the DPS that we get to? Well, we get a total effective DPS of about 9.955 million, or rounded to 10 million DPS. And this POB will be in the description, but I've made some changes to the way that I actually built this build. Number one, pooling life up to level 90, relatively easy. This is on 4700 life, or HP for your character, but it can be increased significantly with just changes in the tree. For example, you know, we'll talk about the tree when we get to the tree, but there's some relatively easy points you can take. You can keep just taking more life points in here, so the life wheel in here, or anywhere else in the tree, really up to you how you do it. Now, it does take advantage of a large cluster dual setup in this particular build. Now, if you're wondering about how Soulwrest works, if you've never played Soulwrest before, basically what we do is it requires this Soulwrest Ephemeral staff, and this staff's important because this has level 20 trigger Phantasm skill when you consume a corpse. Now, I had a lot of questions about, do you need to put a Phantasm gem into the staff? Well, yes, you do need to put a summon Phantasm gem into the staff. This means that you can get 20 Phantasms. Now, I haven't got a corrupted gem, or a Val gem, corrupted gem for level 21. At this stage, just because I haven't played this league as much as I normally would. But when you get a level 21 gem, you actually get 21 Phantasms, and you get 495,000 DPS per Phantasm with this build, which means that's 10.5 million DPS in aggregate. Now, when you fight an enemy, you have your Signal Prey, so this also uses Signal Prey, or Predator, sorry. They keep changing the name of it. And then when you fight a boss, you just tap Signal Prey and Sniper's Mark onto the boss, and it gets murdered. Now, a few other things in this build that are different to what I've done with the Witch variation is, obviously, this is a Guardian, so there are predicated buff nodes, or predetermined buff nodes that are built into the Guardian tree. I've completely forgotten how to check my sentences. There we go. So for example, you get Radiant Crusade and you'll get Unwavering Crusade. We'll talk about the effect of these later, but they're really good. Not only that, you also get Bastion of Hope. That's going to increase your damage, your defense as well for your minions and yourself. And the other advantage of using the Guardian is you'll actually get Onslaught on your enemies. So while there's at least 5 nearby allies, you get Onslaught. Now, we get Fortify from our AG, or our Animated Guardian. We get crit. We can mitigate crit damage using our AG as well. Our Animate Guardian is pretty dope, and I'll put up a link to the build, to the AG guide that I put up last league, which basically outlines the gear that we'll be using, like Kingmaker and Garb of the Ephemeral and all that sort of crap. Anyway, so how the mechanic works is you'll spin, you'll generate corpses, Flesh Offering will pop, and then you'll generate a shitload of minions that'll run around. And as you can see, I've got a screen full of minions in front of me, and then basically what you would have seen in the B-roll at the start is they just follow you around and kill everything. And then as you go, you'll basically go through the maps and you'll hit E, which is Convocation, and then you'll summon your enemies on top of you, so you're always in a constant stream in the middle of the fray, as you would call it. Taking bosses down, really easy. There's a few mechanics we'll talk about when we talk about cluster duels, and yeah. But anyway, this is going to be my my first build guide for this league, and I know it's right at the end of the league, but you'll be able to apply this for the next league, hopefully. We don't know what next leagues are going to be like. We never know what the patch notes are. But anyway, I'm sorry that I haven't put up any videos. Just been a very busy 2 months. Everything's winding back down again, so I'll be back to my normal upload schedules I've actually got 2 more build guides that I'll do next weekend as well, and put those up after the announcement of the new league, and then we'll do some new content. And also I'm going to be implementing more of a streaming schedule moving forwards, but the channel will be going back to how it normally is. So yeah, and if you guys, I'll do a video and I'll explain where I've been and what I've been doing and things like that, and to no specific detail, but enough detail that you'll understand, you know, yeah, being pretty crazy. Anyway, let's get into the guide, and let's start talking about how this build works. Okay, so from the armor and primary gear perspective, the first item that we're actually going to look at is the belly of the beast. Now, uniquely, this piece of gear, while cheap, is actually only a 6 socket, and the reason why is we actually have a 4 socket setup in our gear. If you have a look at the POB, that's in the description, which is going to be 2 blue and 2 green sockets, which are in 4-link, and then 2 red sockets, which is going to be a cast when damage taken Immortal Call setup. Now, the advantage of the belly of the beast straight off the bat is, you know, increased elemental resistance, 36 or up to 40% increased maximum life, and also increased flask life recovery rates, and you also get extra gore, which is really cool. Doesn't really do anything, but you know, is what it is. The next item that you're going to get is a Triad Grip. So like any other Soulwrest setup, the reason why you want this is to convert, you know, minions convert physical damage into cold damage in this situation. So for this one, you want all green sockets in this item. Now, looking at the helm, the Devouring Diadem is still the best pick. This is mainly because of the mana reservation reduction for socketed aura gems. Also, you get level 15 Feast of Flesh, which every 5 seconds consumes corpses, summons phantasms, and, you know, gives you life and mana. And then on top of that, it's also got Eldritch Battery, which converts your ES pool into your mana pool, which means you can 100% reserve your mana. Now, you normally want to get this with the Chaos Resistance as well, just for extra survivability. Now, looking at the boots, you're just going to get basically any Goliath Greaves that gives you movement speed, maximum life. Try and get about 105 is what I've got on mine, but if you can get more the better, and then cap your resistances with your boots. Now, the other item that you're going to need here as well is going to be the Darkness Enthroned. The reason why is you're going to get 2 Ghastly Eyes, socket them in, and if you get Ghastly Eyes, get ones with life, get ones with minion damage if you've used the skill recently, get flat minion damage, say the physical or cold minion damage, and then any other minion stat that you can get or stat that you need, and then it gets amplified by 75% by the Darkness Enthroned, which is why this is one of the most commonly used minion belts pretty much out there. Now for your weapon, it's pretty obvious. This is a Soulwrest build, so you're going to need a Soulwrest. This gives you level 20, trigger level 20 Phantasm skill when you consume a corpse, which is why this is really important. And then on top of that, you're mainly just going to get some, you know, increased mana regeneration, cast speed, spell damage, all that sort of jazz. But what we really want this for is the Phantasm skill. Now also, you do need a 6-socketed version of this, but you do not need a 6-linked for this to work, because that skill is built into the staff. Any gem that you put in the staff will automatically be 6-linked. Now, the other thing is you will need 5 blue and 1 green socket for this one to get this one to work properly and the way that it's set up in the POB. Now for jewelry, this is really straightforward with this build. You're going to be using 2 unset rings with blue sockets in them, and you basically just want to go for maximum life, maximum resistances, and any other stats that you could get in your build, essentially. That's pretty much it. They're very straightforward, very easy to get. They're relatively cheap to get okay rings. They don't need to be absolutely perfect, which is what makes this an affordable way of going about it. Now, the different thing in this build compared to the last one that I did is I used to use the Jinx Juju, but I actually found the Perquill's Toe pretty useful, and also you get increased rarity, you get a heap of dex, you get 7% increased movement speed, and nearby allies damage with hits is lucky, which from a crit perspective is pretty damn good. So this basically buffs your phantasms up further. There's the caveat that lightning damage of enemies hitting you is lucky, but let's be honest, that's not too bad. It doesn't really hinder you at all as you go. Now the anoint that you're going to want on this amulet is going to be Ravenous Horde. Also, I should note this is a really cheap amulet. You could switch this out for anything. I just prefer to use this. Works quite well, but you could go any direction that you wanted with this one. Now, as with the Witch variation, jewels that you're going to be using throughout the tree and in your Darkness Enthroned belt is going to be the Ghastly Eye jewels, which drop from Abyss encounters, and they're going to have increased damage if you've used a minion skill recently, life, resistances, and just flat minion damage. If you can get any critical on it, even better. I don't believe you can from memory, but I could be wrong on that one too. And then second to that, as always, a Fortress Covenant. You can't go wrong with a Fortress Covenant as long as you put it in the right spot. Doesn't affect your tree in any way, shape, or form, and actually gives your minions a huge damage buff up to 40%. But these are the jewels that I rock in this build in particular. Alright, so the fun part, skill gems. So in your helm, you're going to be running Zealotry, Hatred, Summon Skitterbots, and Generosity, because this is your Devouring Diadem. All these skills get buffed by your helm. In your chest, you're going to have a 4-link setup and a 2-link setup. You're going to run in the 4-link setup Cyclone, Cast While Channeling, Flesh Offering, and Desecrate. This will consume the corpses, so that triggers your Phantasm from your Soulwrest skill. In your chest, you're just going to be running Cast from Damage Taken and Immortal Call, normally about level 5 Immortal Call to level 1 Cast when Damage Taken, so it procs constantly. Now in your boots, you'll be running Raise Spectre, Feeding Frenzy, Animate Guardian, and Minion Life. In your weapon, which is your staff in this case, your Soulwrest, you're going to be running Elemental Focus, Signal Prey, Hypothermia, Controlled Destruction, and Minion Damage. You're also going to want to run the actual Phantasm gem, which I haven't gotten on this list here, but it's in the POB further to this. Now, in the gloves, you're going to be running Dash, Second Wind, Sniper's Mark, and Phase Run. And then finally, with your rings, you're going to be running Carrion Golem and Convocation. Now, I should note with the gloves, when you run your phase run, set that as your primary movement or your left click button, so then it constantly procs phase run as you're running around the maps, and this is going to give you a huge clearance speed boost and movement speed boost. If we were running the variation of the build which used the Witch, we would change that to Bone Armor, but we don't need to in this case. We can run phase run on our move button in this situation with the Guardian. Alright, so for your Spectre minions, you're going to be running one Host Chieftain. This can be found in Act 7 in the Ashen Fields. A Carnage Chieftain, same, Act 7 in the Ashen Fields. Both of these are going to give you your minions power charges and frenzy charges, which is going to give you a huge buff. And then you want to get an Arena Master, which you can get from the Warlord influence maps, and this one usually takes a little bit more hunting around, but it's relatively easy to find and gives you a huge speed and damage boost to your minions. Arena Masters are also incredibly tanky and very rarely die throughout the game. In fact, I don't ever really see them die at all. They're just an absolute beast. But that's pretty much the Spectres you want to get. I won't talk about the AG in great detail. I'll put a link in the description in the video, and you can have a look at my other video which talks about how to set up your Animate Guardian. This one. So we're starting with the Guardian. So essentially, we're actually going to start at this point here. Now we're going to go from the Guardian start nodes. We're going to move down. And pick up the strength nodes. Now, normally you might pick up these nodes in here at the very start, but you don't really need to with this build in particular. But anyway, what you'll end up doing is moving down, pick up Grave Pact, you come down, pick up Constitution, and then come down and pick up Warrior's Blood. Now, you don't need these nodes straight away, but you can pick them up if you want. That's mainly just getting that additional amount of HP. You can also go through to Diamond Skin if you need that resistance and whatnot, but the reason why we go down at the very start of this tree is to basically just get these nodes out of the way so then we can move on. So then we'll come up, we'll pick up Discipline and Training, we'll move up to Retribution, then we'll move up and we'll pick up Sacrifice and Spiritual Command. Now, we're going to be working on getting our minion damage up in this respect, but anyway, we'll get to there when we get to there. So, then we'll come across, to the right, we're going to go for Enduring Bond. Because we're going to be using Phantasms, we want increased damage upon the use of minion skills. So, not so much just passive minions being present, but you're going to be using a minion skill. You want to then buff your damage up, which we'll talk about the Ghastly Eyes very shortly as well that we're using on this build. So then you'll come back, you'll come down here, pick up Fortress Covenant. Now we're going to want Elemental Equilibrium. So this is similar to the last time we run this build because we're actually going to be running Avatar of Fire. And the way that it works is when you hit the enemy, when you cyclone around or whatever, you proc Avatar of Fire. That then first hits the enemy with, your, well, what do you want to call it? Your fire damage. And then when your allies come across and smack the enemy, then they're going to do increased damage based on Elemental Equilibrium because the enemy is actually going to have a higher resistance to fire and 50% reduced resistance to cold damage, which is what your Phantasms will do. So then you'll come across to the left, you'll pick up Heart and Soul and Lord of the Dead. Now, this is just buffing up your minions and giving you some more life. It's not huge, but it's just a quality of life scenario. So you can get away with not going to this area. It just depends on what you're doing. So then you'll come back up. We'll get large clusters last because we don't need them straight away. We'll come up. We'll pick up the Dexterity node because Dex is a big problem with this build. Then we'll go to the Intelligence node up here. We'll get Death Attunement because we're going to want that extra Spectre. And then we're going to go and get Cruel Preparations. This is going to give us all resist and 10% to life, which is really good. Then you'll come to the left, you'll pick up Avatar of Fire. You'll come down, pick up Purity of Flesh, Sovereignty, and then you'll want Righteous Army, Redemption. You'll also want to come down and get Devotion. This is just going to give you more strength and it's going to increase your aura's effectiveness. And this cluster, oh sorry, not this cluster, but this node down here. Now, for the for the actual jewels that we're using in all of the nodes where we can fit jewels in aside from clusters, is we sort of want to use these Ghastly Eyes with 18, but increased damage if you've used a minion skill recently, and then any physical damage, crit or cold damage on cold damage, flat minion cold damage that you can get. The reason why you want to use this 18% increased damage if you've used a minion skill recently is because you're actually going to be using your flesh offering pretty much all the time, and you're going to be summoning Phantasms all the time. So you're always going to be using a minion skill. So if you think about it, if you stack these jewels up, then that's a huge percentage buff to the increase of damage to your minions, not to mention it synergizes with Enduring Bond as well. So anyway, we'll come up. So once you've gotten all your main nodes on your tree, we're going to focus on the cluster. Now, this is expensive to get at the very start of the league, and you're not going to get it at the start of the league, but you will get it by, probably the first 4 weeks or so. Let's say that, or you could self-craft it as well, which a lot of people do at the start of the league. This build is very much a league starter friendly build, but it does require that one staff to get off the ground and going. So you're going to get an 8-socket cluster. It's going to have Renewal. It's going to have Feasting Fiends, and it's going to have Call to Slaughter. Again, we're capitalizing on minions having just been spawned, and that's going to result in increased movement speed and attack speed, which is what you want with this build. Then we're going to get a medium cluster with the 2 nodes Life from Death and Blessed Rebirth. The reason why you want Life from Death is this is going to mean that any minion that's died in the recently in the last few seconds or whatnot, you're going to get 2% life regeneration if a minion has died recently. Also, minions recover 4% of life on minion death. So that's going to buff up your other minions, and also your minions get more life, and this is really good for your AG and your Carrion Golem and your Spectres. And then you'll come down, you get Blessed Rebirth. Now, the importance of this one, if there's one medium cluster that you get first, this is the one to get. Because what this means is that the minions that you, the phantasms that you spawn are actually immortal for the first few seconds once they run to the enemy and whatnot when you're taking down bosses. So this is really good for taking down, you know, instances like the Feared and whatnot at endgame, and it's one of the reasons why Phantasm builds are really good at clearing endgame and progressing through the tree. If you get this node early, your Phantasms aren't going to die as soon as you spawn them, because the other problem with the Phantasm build is if you don't have this, as soon as you spawn minions, they're going to die if there's AoE or something, or dot on the ground or something like that. Whereas this gives them the opportunity to run at the enemy and actually hit the enemy. Bearing in mind, Phantasms are not OP minions individually. They're, you know, that it's about mass numbers to take down enemies effectively. Then we're going to get Surging Vitality. I really like this because it synergizes with the Guardian, and also as in the Guardian passive that we'll talk about very shortly. And this just means you get flat health, you get flat percentage health, and you also get every 4 seconds you regenerate 10% of life over 1 second, which is really good in clutch scenarios or where you need to really survive, like Cyrus and things like that, where you might cop a big hit or you might get hit with dot. This will keep you in the fight and keep you going. The other side of it is I usually get one jewel, medium cluster jewel with replenishing presence and first among equals. This just means that you will get buff effectiveness increases for the buffs that you are using. In this case, you know, we're obviously using Skitterbots, Hatred, and Zealotry. And then you're also going to get replenishing presence, which means you get 1% increased life regeneration per second for you and your minions, and that's going to really enhance your minions' ability to survive. And then on top of that, we're going to get Feast of Flesh. And the reason why we get Feast of Flesh is every time you cyclone around, every enemy that you hit, you're going to get 10 life gain by each enemy hit by your attacks. And what this means is that if you go into a group of enemies, you're going to be able to survive that encounter because you're going to get life as you cyclone around. You're also going to get the Surging Vitality buff, and we're going to get the buff from our Ascendancy as well on the Guardian, which means you're always regenerating health, which makes you a bit more meaty. Now, this isn't the tankiest character, but considering the way that I've set this up, it's pretty damn tanky, as well as the fact that, unlike the Witch variation, we also have a Mortal Call on this character, which I'll talk about shortly, or which I'll cover in the gem setups, or I would have covered in the gem setups as well. That's pretty much the tree. So this will be in this POB, will be in the description. Now, Ascendancies. So the first Ascendancy that you're actually going to get will be Radiant Crusade. This is going to give you 20% all elemental resistance, and it also means that if you've got 5 enemies within your vicinity, 5 allies within your vicinity, you're going to get Onslaught, and Onslaught's going to increase your damage, attack speed, and your movement speed. This also feeds into your minions, which is going to buff your minions. This is one of the advantages that this build has over the Witch, which makes clearing speed a lot quicker with the Soulwrest on the Guardian than the Witch, I've found. Now, the other side of this is, while there's at least one nearby ally, you and nearby allies will have 10% more damage. So this is just a small damage buff. That's just a little bit more meat on the bone for this build. Now, the second Ascendancy you're going to get is going to be Unwavering Crusade. This means that nearby allies get increased attack, cast, and movement speed by 20%. They get more AoE. And also nearby allies intimidate enemies for 4 seconds on hit, and they unnerve enemies on hit as well, which is a unique ability of the Guardian Ascendancy to be able to do that, which is quite good and increases damage further. Now the next one that you're going to get is going to be Time of Need, and what this means is you get 80% reduced effectiveness of curses on you, which is really good. Means you can do a lot of different map mods with this build. You know, temporal chains maps are essentially nothing to this build. And then every 4 seconds you're going to regenerate 30% of life over 1 second. This then synergizes with our Surging Vitality. So we're looking at, you know, every 4 seconds or so you're going to get 40% of your life regenerated over 1 second, which equates to, if we have a look at the tree, it'll constantly be cycling 2200 life, you know, like that, just back in the pool, which is really good. And then the last one you're going to get is going to be Bastion of Hope, and this is just going to look at giving you stun immunity if you've blocked recently, increased block chance, and this is actually giving this build a pretty good amount of block chance to block enemy. Yeah, 72%, but it's not spell block, it's attack block, and that's probably a video for another day. But basically you're just not going to be able to block spells as effectively with this build, but you're going to be able to block attacks, and that's not a bad defensive layer to have. So that's pretty much the skill tree. Okay, so the Pantheon skills that I've selected here, just Soul of Lunaris. This is just going to give you increased movement speed with nearby enemies and physical damage reduction. Physical damage is the bane of this build, so you want to focus on that. And also Soul of Relikesh. This just means that Dot and Bleed are going to be a little less effective. I haven't buffed these out any further at this stage, but these are essentially the Pantheon skills that you want to take. Alright, so the fun one. Cosmetics. What am I running on this character to make it look like some sort of solar knight sort of thing? Alright, so we've got Imperial Sun Helmet attachment, Imperial Sun Helmet, Imperial Sun Body, Imperial Sun Gloves, Imperial Sun Boots. Now, I do like the Legacy footprints. As you can see, I've probably spent too much money on this game. I do have a Subjugated Portal, but obviously my favorite is the Devourer Portal from ExileCon. I am running the Kiwi, which is unique, and a little bit of a flex from being in the beta. And also Imperial Sun weapon effect with classic weapon effect, which was from Legacy League as well, with the classic cloak from Legacy League, because quite frankly, Legacy League was the best league. You can fight me over that one. And I also have the ritual character effect from last league as well, because this is really cool. Anyway, that's what I'm running as my MTX at the moment for this particular build. Okay, so I hope this build guide helps you with a Soulwrest Guardian. Now, I'll put my witch, as I said at the very start, I'll put my witch build guide in the description below as well. And yeah, pretty much feel free to ask any questions you've got about this build. I did do this a bit differently. It only needs a 4-link in this particular build, which is really good. Is it cheap? It starts out cheap, it gets more expensive the more investment you go, which is pretty much like how every build works. The gear that I put in the POB will be the endgame gear that you'll work to. But it's a relatively straightforward build. Once you get the Soulwrest staff, you're good to go. You can usually get that in the first day or a couple days of the league start. It's usually relatively cheap, or like 100 chaos or something like that. Tops up to 30 to 100 chaos, which you can usually generate pretty quickly in the first day or so, just from using various different currency, delving and things like that, or just mapping and selling whatever you can get. But yeah, feel free to comment, give this video a like. I am sorry that I haven't uploaded in so long. So I'm going to do a lot better there and pick up where I left off. There is going to be some Battlefield on the channel as well, probably live streaming Battlefield, since everyone's playing Battlefield 4 and I'm pretty keen for Battlefield. But we're going to be doing a lot of prep for the next league as well in the coming weeks, because we're looking at July. I do have all new gear that I'm going to do a video on as well, in setting all that up. And also I need to think of something, because it's my birthday next month and I don't know quite what I'm going to do for that from a content creation perspective. So any ideas in the description would be pretty awesome. Anyway, like and sub as always. Until next time, bye.